People from all over the world are drawn to the mystique of the Old West for the roughness and romance of it. And that's part of the draw of Cheyenne, Wyoming in the U.S., but that's certainly not all Cheyenne is about. I'm Courtney Drake McDonough, the host of the Real Food Traveler podcast, and I found out on a recent summertime visit that Cheyenne offers many varied and interesting experiences. And that's why I asked Jim Walter, the Vice President and Director of Sales and Marketing for Visit Cheyenne, to be our guest today so that we can all learn more. Jim, thanks so much for joining me today.
Great to be with you. And, you asked me if I'd come and talk to you about Cheyenne. And I said, well, how much time do you have? I love my adopted city, and I love the chance to tell people about it.
Well, good. I always love it when people are passionate about what they're telling us about, because that certainly makes everything come alive for our listeners and our readers. So let's start with some of the facts and stats about Cheyenne, Wyoming, for people who may not be familiar with it.
Sure. Geographically, we're located about 90 miles north of Denver, on the very northern part of what locals call the Front Range of the Colorado Rockies. We're at about 6,000 feet of elevation, and we consider ourselves to be high plains. And so it's a very dry climate, about 13 inches of rain or precipitation a year. 50 inches of that, is snowfall in the wintertime. Absolutely gorgeous summers here. I tell people from just about Memorial Day to what we've always called Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, however we refer to it now. That time frame is just absolutely gorgeous in Cheyenne. Outside of that, it can be a little bit windy, it can be a little bit challenging to enjoy the outdoors. But I grew up in the Northeast, and we have 300 days of sunshine a year, so that really it can be windy and cold outside all at once. If the sun's out, I'm pretty happy with that. We've been here since 1867, and Cheyenne was the main reason Cheyenne is where it is was that's when they were building the Transcontinental Railroad. And as it came across Nebraska and headed toward the Rocky Mountains, the surveyors were out ahead trying to find how are we going to get these trains over these 12, 13, 14,000 foot mountain peaks. And they found that Sherman Hill, which is just to the west of Cheyenne, was a great place with a reasonable grade to get up and over, and about a 9,000 foot summit up in that area made it a little easier. So Cheyenne became the base camp, basically, to get over the Rockies and to get on over toward Provo and drive the Golden Spike a few years later. A lot of these railroad towns that popped up and disappeared as the railroad moved on to the next town and the next base camp. Those towns dried up, but Cheyenne stayed. And Cheyenne became a center of prosperity, became the territorial capital of Wyoming, and then later the capital. And if you come and visit us today, the historic depot is on the south end of Capitol Avenue. The Capitol is on the north end of Capitol Avenue. And the story that's always related is that the politicians built the Capitol there to keep an eye on the railroad, and the railroad built a depot here to keep an eye on the politicians. So some pretty cool history in our town.
And I was surprised by the population too for such a big state.
Yeah, we're the 8th largest state with in land mass. We are the smallest state in population. There's about 500,000 people in the entire state of Wyoming. And 100,000 of those people, so 20%, live right here in the greater Cheyenne area. Laramie County is the county we're in. We have about 70,000 that live in the city proper, and then another 30,000 live in the outlying areas.
Wow, so lots of open space.
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, in the early days of COVID, we had a meme that we created that said, Wyoming practicing social distancing for 200 years. So
that's great. When a lot of people think of Wyoming and Cheyenne in particular, and I'm doing air quotes here that you can't see, Old West and cowboys come to mind. Does Cheyenne embrace that, or do you find it kind of limiting in any way?
we've struggled over the years in what do we do with that Western history? Um, our tagline as a Visitors Bureau for a long time has been Cheyenne living the legend. Our police cars all say protecting the legend on the back of the police cars. So, but not everybody. And when you're a growing city and you're trying to attract new technology, new businesses, younger people, um, you know, Gen Z, millennials, they don't have as close of a tie to the West. I'm 46 years old, and I'd say, a lot of people that, on the young end of Gen X, on the older end of millennials, were the last that you would come home from school and there would be Westerns on TV. You would turn on the TV on a Saturday. I grew up with, 3 or 4 television stations, and one of them always had John Wayne movies on. So the West was a romantic idea for me. But younger generations didn't quite have that exposure. So as a Visitors Bureau, and as somebody that's trying to drive the conversations in the community, we had to have some real conversations about what do we do with that Western heritage? Do we go all in? And we kept coming back to there's a lot of things to do here in Cheyenne that are not necessarily Western, but might be here because we've been Western. When you've got one of the greatest outdoor rodeos in the world, you don't run from that. Cheyenne Frontier Days is the last full week of July, and that brings cowboys and cowgirls and animal athletes from literally around the world to come and compete here. We hand out over $1 million in checks to our cowboys and cowgirls that week. We put on, as a Visitors Bureau, 6 rodeos a year called the Hell on Wheels Rodeo Series, which is an opportunity for people who are here in Cheyenne and it's not Frontier Days to see what a live rodeo looks like, to experience that up close and in person. And we pair that together with a chuck wagon dinner. Visitors that are coming here love that, romantic West. They love the history of the railroad. So the people that live here on a regular basis, they've got a variety of interests. So how do we play to that? And what we've done is we've started to refer to it as Cheyenne chic. That's our live music scene. That's our restaurant scene. That's our museum scene. It's our arts scene in general. And it's, part of come and explore a side of Cheyenne that you may have not known existed. When we look at our brand, communities spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to brand themselves. You go anywhere in the world and say Cheyenne, and people know exactly, what you're talking about. But there's also that side of our community that people may have never experienced. And so we've leaned into that. And while we haven't completely gone away from the West, we've said, hey, come and experience some of the best in professional rodeo in the afternoon. And then in the evening, have a 3-course meal at a place with a great wine list, or catch a live show that maybe isn't necessarily country music. And it's something that's been very successful for us to explore.
Good. That's great. Now, agriculture is a big part of Wyoming, and we certainly saw that in some of the events my husband and I attended, including, as you mentioned, the Hell on Wheels and the Chuck Wagon Dinner and Rodeo, and the beautiful feast in the field that we had at a local farm, but also at the Cheyenne Farmers Market, which just blew us away with a variety of local produce and products that were there. So can you talk a little bit more about the agriculture and agritourism scene in Cheyenne?
Absolutely. Having lived in upstate New York before I moved to Cheyenne, we leaned hard into the agritourism where I was before. And, and since coming here, we've watched our agritourism products develop more and more. If you're coming into Wyoming, south of Cheyenne, you hit, one of the bigger agritourism sites that in the region with the Terry Bison Ranch. They've got a herd of 3,500 bison and a smaller herd that they actually have that they put customers on a train and take the train out into the bison herd, where you can then hand feed the bison, which is really cool. And we like to say it's the only place you can safely take a selfie with a bison in the state of Wyoming. and you learn about, the history of that ranch and the history of ranching in general and what it takes to run a ranch in 2022. So that's been a really important and popular place. And you can go and eat in their restaurant. You can have a bison burger or bison short ribs. So you kind of get that full circle of, feed a bison, eat a bison, but also learn about the farming and learn about the fact that your meat doesn't come from the store. I mean, that might be where you buy it, but they're not making it out in the back. That there are ranchers and farmers that are every day out there putting it on the line financially, physically, with their families to put food on the table for everyday Americans. And so that's the important part of agritourism in my mind. I think about it. I grew up on a dairy farm, but the closest my daughter's involved in rodeo, so she's around animals, she's around farm animals and ranches. But there's a lot of kids, and there's a lot of people even my age that have no connection back to the farm. My parents' generation, either if they didn't grow up on a farm, they had an uncle on a farm, and that's where you spent summers. You went to the farm. I hear so many stories from different families about the farm, and I'm using the air quotes that people can't see. And agritourism is important because we need to have people have that farm experience. They need to understand what rural life is like here in America. So you've got the Terry Bison Ranch. We've got a really cool experience just east of town as you get out on the plains, a little town called Carpenter, a little place called Pine Ranch. They do a homesteading experience. So you can come and spend the day and you can learn what it was like to show up there in a Conestoga wagon and put down roots. You churn the butter, you milk the cow by hand, you do a lot of the manual labor, and you get a real education on the homesteading movement from the 1800s, early 1900s, and what life was like in that day and age. And then there's things like our distilleries and our breweries, where you might not think, I'm going to craft breweries this weekend. You may not think, hey, that's agritourism. But here in Wyoming, we've got a distillery out in the western or eastern part of the county that also has a malting company, and they source all of their grains from a 25-mile radius of the malting company. They then make it into bourbon, vodka, gin, rye whiskey as well. And they call it they call their model a farm to flask model. The farmer drops it off, it goes into the malting facility, and it gets distilled, goes into the barrel, and then into a bottle eventually. And it's all done right there locally, providing value added to that agriculture product. And those malts and grains that they're using as well are going to some of the breweries in Cheyenne. And some of the breweries in Cheyenne are using those local grains to brew their beers, making it an even more hyper-local product. So, some really neat ways to look at agritourism, a lot of different ways to look at agritourism, but they're all, so important. Usually, it's educating people about farms. It's finding value added for the products that the farms and the ranches are creating, and, providing an experience for people.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And at the farm to table dinner that we attended, I got to talk to the couple that own the bison ranch that had provided the bison for that dinner. And it was so interesting to talk to them. And I'd just been standing next to them watching the dinner being made. We hadn't talked to each other yet. And we just happened to strike up a conversation. And it was just so amazing to me that, they provided this meat for this dinner, and they have this whole other lifestyle that I do. And we had a really wonderful talk, and it really was just so great to personally connect with ranchers, the people who make it their livelihood to provide these products to all of us. So there are lots of opportunities like that. And I love that homesteading idea. That's really wonderful. But that is the nice thing, is that there are opportunities to be able to connect with personally with the people behind the food, whether it's at an event like that, or at the chuck wagon dinner, or at the farmer's market, at the restaurants, any number of ways. And I really, liked that it was so approachable. And speaking of food, Cheyenne is a great place for foodies, as we found out when we visited, and the variety of restaurants was really impressive. From super casual and food trucks, all the way to I would call it fine dining. We went to a couple places that were really fantastic. So can just to give us a sense of the variety of restaurants, can you give us a taste of that, of both the food and drink options that are available to people when they visit Cheyenne?
And it's interesting you mentioned food trucks because 6 years ago, I don't think we had a food truck in Cheyenne. And now, there's 9, 10, 11 of them that are out, in various places around the community. It's a very diverse food scene in the offerings that are out there. We've got, I wouldn't consider sushi in a city that's about as far away from the ocean as you can get. We've got a wonderful sushi restaurant downtown, Beijo, it's called. I enjoy going there for sushi a couple of times a year. And then you've got what you would expect. We've been talking about agritourism. We've been talking about, Cheyenne in general, the West. Steak is the cuisine of Cheyenne. So we've got some wonderful steakhouses in this community. The Wyoming Rib and Chop House is our downtown steakhouse, and they do a wonderful job. And then you've got places like Little Bear, which is north of town, an old stagecoach outpost, one of the great hidden gems as far as steakhouses go in the community. The Metropolitan downtown is, as fine dining as it gets. They hired a chef out of Denver originally. He came up here, got it up, got it running, and he's actually moved on and started his own food truck empire. He's got, I think, 2 trucks now. And then he's opening a restaurant on the west edge of downtown this summer or this fall. So a big variety. And, we're an Air Force town, FU, we're in Air Force bases here. And what you find with a lot of airmen is, they like their chains because, ostensibly a Texas Roadhouse in Cheyenne is going to be similar to the Texas Roadhouse in Minot, North Dakota. It provides, same with, an Olive Garden, it provides that, nice familiarity for them. But then when they start spreading out and checking out Napoli's for Italian food, or as I mentioned, the Wyoming Rib and Chop House, we see them start to spread out and expand their culinary horizons quite a bit. So it's a nice variety. It brings us, we've got 4 breweries downtown with a 5th one on the way, a distillery downtown as well. And so that food, that drink scene, if you want a really good old fashioned, you can find one of those at the Paramount Ballroom. If you're looking for a fantastic chili beer, which I love chili beers, but I've never had one before I came to Cheyenne, you can find that at a brewery. So a lot of hardworking individuals, again, a lot like I said about our farmers and ranchers, they're putting their livelihoods on the line to create a product and create something here in our community that people can be proud of. And it's excited. I've been excited to watch it grow.
Yeah. And I need to put out a little shout out for the Metropolitan, where I had probably the best hamburger of my life there. It was perfect in every way. And what was kind of a kick in the pants to me was that it's this very elegant looking restaurant, and we were seated in green velvet banquettes. So I'm, sitting on green velvet eating this fantastic hamburger, but that was really delicious. So that was a great place, and I encourage people to go there. So we've talked quite a bit about food and drink in Cheyenne because, Real Food Traveler, that's what we're all about. But there is a lot more to experience there in Cheyenne. What are some of your top picks for things to do so that a visitor would get a real feel for the full range of things to do? And I'm going to put in my request that you be sure to talk a little bit about the Botanic Gardens, which blew us away.
Our Botanic Gardens is really, really cool. And it's a publicly funded project. So about 5 years ago now, maybe longer, I'm starting to lose track of time. they opened their new Grand Conservancy. And it's my favorite secret place to watch a sunset when you're in Cheyenne is to go over to the Botanic Gardens. Up on the second floor, they've got an outside rooftop patio. That from that patio, you can see the foothills of the Rockies, and on a good day, you can see all the way to the Rocky Mountains and watch the sunset. So that's my hidden, well, here's a local secret of something you need to do when you're in Cheyenne. Other attractions, our state capitol just had a $300 million restoration where they, I liken it to, you move into a house that was built in the 30s and you pull up the shag carpeting that was put in the 70s and you realize that they've got beautiful oak hardwood floors. You think, why would people cover that up? There's a lot of that going on in our state capitol. Every time, they needed to add a room or move something around or add an office, they boarded things up, they covered walls. And so they tore a lot of that out. It's a very historical building. And in the state capitol, you'll find the Supreme Court chambers where the bill was signed into law by the governor that guaranteed women the right to vote and hold public office in 150 years ago from 2019. So math in 1869 is when that happened. 50 years before the 19th Amendment was ratified. And in fact, Congress told Wyoming that, if they were going to come into the Union, they had to eliminate that right to vote for women. And Wyoming answered back, you can keep your statehood. We're going to allow our women to vote. And, in the 1800s, if you were a woman living here in Wyoming, you were one tough cookie, and I wouldn't have wanted to renege on that either. So it was a good decision by the men that were running the state legislature. And, we're home to the first woman governor in the history of the United States here as well. First woman justice of the peace. So a lot of that great history, you can learn about that in our state capitol building. The Wyoming State Museum just down the street, that covers everything from the national parks to the move west to the conflicts with the indigenous people that were living here. And it covers it all in a very good and fair way and really gives a great history of our state. If you want to see things, across the city in one fell swoop, buying the 90-minute trolley tour, it's $15. It's a Wild West history tour. Then you ride a trolley around town and hear about the history of Cheyenne and the things that happened here. For our days of being that hell on wheels rodeo town to a few short years later, we've got some of the first gas streetlights in America, and we were known as the Paris of the West because of the high per capita earnings of the cattle growers that were here. To just a few years after that, seeing that whole cattle industry wiped completely out. So some fascinating history, and you'll learn about that on that narrated trolley tour. And then if you happen to come in the fall, that trolley tour in October is a haunted trolley tour. So we do 90 minutes of ghost stories around Cheyenne. And as you can imagine, in a town that was full of outlaws and transients, and so much was being built, and there was so much tragedy, there's plenty of ghost stories to go around, and it's really very interesting. Also I think about other things to do here. If you like outdoor adventure, just 25 minutes to the west, right up in the foothills of the Rockies, you'll find Kurt Gowdy State Park. And they've got 35 miles of trails for hiking, and they're rated epic for mountain biking. I've done a lot of trail running up there. You can stand up paddleboard, you can camp, and it's all very convenient. So those would be kind of my highlights of the things that here are the must-see things that you've got to do when you're in Cheyenne.
Those are great things. So one thing we did when we were there, and I'm going to mess up the name, but the Cowgirl Museum?
Cowgirls of the West. Yes.
Yeah, Cowgirls of the West, which was such a surprise. It was just like in a little storefront, basically, downtown, and is this charming free museum that's jam packed with, memorabilia and information and costumes and vignettes and a great video in the back. Be sure you go all the way to the back to watch that because it was very informative. But I mean, it was a great springboard given the very progressive history for women there to also see the role that cowgirls played and still play to this day. It was very interesting. So I definitely recommend people pop in there and, allow yourself at least an hour to go through everything because it was really fun. How about events that happen throughout the year in Cheyenne? I know you mentioned Cheyenne Frontier Days, which is a classic, but what are some other key ones throughout the year that we should watch for and maybe plan our trips around?
You know, that's kind of the cool thing is, I talked earlier in the podcast about how amazing our weather is in the summertime, and we take full advantage of that with some great community events. Obviously, Cheyenne Frontier Days, that's 10 days, 9 Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association rodeos, 7 concerts, typically country music or rock, a couple of professional bull riding events. That's the one that everybody knows us for. But you've got events throughout the year. The Wyoming Brewers Festival is Father's Day weekend, usually Friday night and Saturday night, where they take the Depot Plaza, which is in downtown Cheyenne. There's live music, usually somewhere between 25 and 30 breweries sampling their beers. One of our more popular events that goes on every summer. We've got a wonderful Celtic festival that happens in early June, where you'll have a lot of bagpipes. They do some Scottish games and some strongman competitions with that as well. Celtic music down on the plaza, displays from Celtic families and clans out at the park. So if you've got some Celtic history in your bloodlines, you can learn a lot about that and learn a lot about the different clans from that part of Europe. Welcoming back this year after a couple of year hiatus because of COVID, we'll have our Greek Festival. Greek Festival happens out at the rodeo grounds at Cheyenne Frontier Days, but it's Friday night and Saturday, and it's Greek music and Greek food and Greek culture. And we're real excited. We've got a really cool Greek community here in Cheyenne, a couple of Greek Orthodox churches here, and that Greek community is very, very, very proud, and they love putting that festival on. And, the food is just fantastic and something that people look forward to. The Hispanic Festival we do every year. We've got a rich Hispanic culture here in Cheyenne that continues to grow. And, that's probably our most colorful festival when I think about it. The young ladies in their dresses, the mariachi bands, the dancing, the food, the flavors. That Hispanic festival this year, it's going to be, I think it's coming up next weekend here, or comes up in September every year. That one used to be in June, but they moved it into the fall, which is nice as well. So some big festivals, and every year we do what we call Edge Fest, which is on the west edge of downtown. And we've got a local committee that brings in a couple of pop bands and food trucks and displays. It's really to celebrate the rebirth and regrowth of our west edge of our downtown. And that Edge Fest has had some pretty amazing artists over the years. They have this uncanny knack of discovering an artist about 2 years before they blow up nationally. And they do a lot of that through, guess what, TikTok. Who's popular on TikTok, and who's going to be, see their star or their rocket take off after this year. And they've done a very good job of identifying those. And it provides a whole different flair and a whole different feeling for our community.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear there's such a variety. That's really cool. I mean, it shows how well-rounded you are as a city to have that big a variety. So, you're obviously very passionate about Cheyenne. It's literally your job to learn about everything and get to know everybody and have your finger on the pulse of everything that's going on. But you also live there in upstate New York and Wyoming. That's a big difference.
It is.
So tell me, from your personal point of view, from you as a resident there, what it is about Cheyenne that you've come to love so much.
I think the thing I love about Cheyenne, and I was very lucky over Labor Day weekend. I got married, so I was able to host a lot of my family, a lot of my wife's family who had never been here before, and show this community off to them. And I think for me, what I love about this community is how friendly everybody is, how open and welcoming they were when I moved here, 10 years ago. But the thing that I've been most impressed with, and the thing that I probably do the most in this community, is spend time in our downtown. Our downtown, like so many downtowns, has had such a hard go of it over the last 30 years. And the growth that I've seen in our community over the last 5 years has been amazing. The art, the amount of public art that we have downtown, it blew me away 10 years ago when I moved here. We probably had 7 or 8 bronze statues around town, 25 giant cowboy boots that were painted and decorated. And I thought, wow, look at all this public art. That's pretty progressive for a Western city. It's only exploded by leaps and bounds since then. Between the depot and the Capitol on Capitol Avenue, there's a project going on that they're going to probably finish this year. That's put a bronze statue on every corner between the depot and the Capitol. Some honoring concepts, some honoring animals, some honoring people. But it's really cool to see all these different bronze statues that have been bought and paid for by the community. We have murals like you wouldn't believe. I think 5 years ago, we had 2 or 3 murals downtown. Now we've got somewhere in the vicinity of 30 or 35 murals downtown. In fact, even today, I had to come to work a different way than I normally do. And I saw a mural that I'd never seen before. I just happened to be on a different street, and they're just so creative. And we've done a fairly decent job of keeping them themed appropriately while allowing artists to have kind of, their artistic reign to do them. But, a lot of Western themed murals, a lot of animal themed murals, some of them pretty funky as well. And so just enjoying that scene of, how it's grown. We had 1 brewery when I moved here. Soon we'll have 5 breweries in our downtown. We didn't even have a steakhouse downtown when I moved here. Now we've got a couple of good steakhouses downtown. Just to watch that growth and spend so much time down here, that's my favorite part. And then the shopping has really just, really grown over the last couple of years as well. A lot of Western boutique shops, a lot of modern shopping as well. Some great arts places to visit. A lot of places that are creating product here and then selling it. And that's just been so much fun to watch take off. And it's my favorite part of Cheyenne.
That's awesome. And first of all, congratulations on getting married. That's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Good for you. Well, this has been really informative. And even though I visited, obviously it was just a quick weekend, I couldn't learn it all, but I've certainly learned a lot more talking to you today, and certainly makes me want to come back and especially for some of those festivals, and kind of build a trip around some of those and go exploring some more. But for those who, would like to come visit for the first time or come back and kind of really go exploring, what are the best ways for people to get started planning a trip to Cheyenne?
Sure. Cheyenne.org is a great resource. At that website, you will find our calendar of events that is coming up, all the concerts and live music that are on tap for our community. You'll find coupons and savings passes to help you make your dollar stretch a little bit further when you're in Cheyenne. Lots of great things on that website to help you plan that trip. Following us on our socials as well. We're very active on Twitter at Cheyenne WY, which is, we grabbed that early, and I think the city still wishes they had that, but no, that's ours. Or if you check on Facebook, we're at Visit Cheyenne, same with Instagram. And we do have a TikTok page too for our listeners who have TikTok and use TikTok. Even I have TikTok now, but I'm usually watching people grill steaks or smoke meat, or I use it for, I call it steak TikTok, but you can find some stuff about Cheyenne on there as well. So all those digital places are great places to look. You can also request a visitor's guide. We'll send you a good old-fashioned guide that's got our listings of hotels and restaurants and attractions and things to do.
Cool. Well, this has been so much fun. I've learned a lot, and it brought my visit all back to me fresh again. I can just picture it all as you're talking about it. And I hope our listeners and our readers enjoyed this too, and certainly make plans to go visit Cheyenne. And this is as good a time as any for me to remind people that the Real Food Travel podcast, Real Food Traveler podcast, is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other listening services. We're always getting picked up new places that I'm not even aware of. But we're also on the realfoodtraveler.com website, where we'll have an article about our podcast today, my conversation with Jim Walter, where we'll have the links to the website that Jim just mentioned, Cheyenne.org, and to their social media. And we'll have some photos on there and some snippets from our conversation today. So there'll be a little player there that you can click on and listen to the podcast right then and there, as well as having the visuals and the links. So, Jim, thank you so much for joining me today and for telling us all these interesting things about Cheyenne. I mean, the Wild West history is great, and if that's what draws you in, that's fine, but you're going to find a whole lot more, and you really brought that to life for us. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come and visit us in person and inviting me on your podcast. Like I told you before we got it started, I could talk all day long about Cheyenne, so I'm glad to share and look forward to hosting some travelers up here to figure out their own place in our culinary scene.
Great. Well, love your enthusiasm. It's great and it's contagious. So thanks again.
Thank you.